we've seen, and as you've seen on Facebook and on the flyer for the event today, there's lots of questions about net zero, like why are the right so intent on stopping it? Why do they hate climate change? Isn't the idea of carbon offsetting just a capitalist pipe dream? If so, what's the socialist vision of a sustainable economy? So here tonight, to kick off a conversation that tackles these questions, we have John Sinha. John is a climate activist, hacker, and eco-revolutionary socialist. He's been a member of the Campaign Against Climate Change for about 17 years now. And among his main activities, he was involved in organizing the first international climate demonstrations timed for the COP in 2005, with responsibility for maintaining the global website and setting up climate justice in 2008. Recently, he has been involved in Code Rude in the Netherlands. By 2020, We Rise Up initiative, Time to Cycle, and Ende Gelände, which is funny in German, as part of its international mobilization. And John is also a contributor to the 1 Million Climate Jumps pamphlet. Here is John speaking for about 20 minutes.
Okay, good afternoon, comrades. Thank you for the flattering introduction. So yeah, where do we begin with this discussion? Because it is, to me, we're living in a kind of very surreal world. You know, in the week that the IPCC, they released a report saying, you know, the time is running out for us on climate change, that we need to take action urgently. You know, in the same week that that is going on, we have got this almost surreal, it's like we're inhabiting two parallel universes. One where there's the discussion about climate change, and the other discussion, which is about energy security and, you know, the skyrocketing fuel bills, people are saying. And I think for a lot of people, this, you know, it's a bit disorientating and a bit jarring, trying to, you know, reconcile these two completely opposed ideas, which, you know, one is getting the dominant argument is about the, you know, energy bills and stuff like that. And then the other discussion about the climate crisis is being overlooked. I'm just going to share my screen now. So I've got some slides to show you. Let's do view slideshow. So, you know, as I said, you know, cost of living, energy bills to rise 14 times faster than wages. That's according to the TUC. And of course, the IPCC is saying any further delay in concerted global action will miss a brief and rapidly closing window to secure a livable future. And so this is a report that I was referring to earlier, in which the climate scientists say, yes, we can. It's not too late, but we have to take urgent action now. And this is where the unreality begins to set in, because you've got, you know, I've got here a net zero strategy, which is produced by the government on their plans for net zero. And as you can see, the pathway for reductions doesn't really coincide with what the climate scientists are saying. So if you look here, you've got this very, very gradual reduction, and it really, net zero hides a multitude of sins. It's a kind of burn now, pay later scam, as Kevin Anderson described. It's a total net zero is a complete scam, which does not address the climate crisis. And anyway, as you can see here, this is very, very slow reduction. You've got also technologies like greenhouse gas removal. So if you look at this graph, you can see I've introduced this line. I put this line in here because you've got these negative emissions coming in, kicking on around 2030, which are totally unproven. You know, things like carbon capture and storage, which have, they are the kind of science fiction fantasy technologies which we are relying on for salvation, and which are not proven to work. Also within the whole net zero scam is, you know, the idea that you can burn now and actually deal with the problem later. And this is totally in contradiction to what climate scientists are saying. The urgency is now. We need to be front loading, or what they call front loading our emissions. That means making drastic emissions reductions as soon as possible, and not delaying the cuts and into the future, because by then it's too late. And this is what this group shows you here. So you've got this, you know, gigatons of carbon, and you can see here, had we started our emissions, you know, if we started our emission reductions in 2000, we would have required a reduction of about 4% a year. And that would have been doable under, you know, market economy. You could have, in theory, have instituted a plan for reduction. But because we've left it so late, the later we leave it, the steeper these reduction curves become, and the more urgent it becomes to have very, very rapid short-term reductions. And we are somewhere around here, you know. Our emissions should have peaked. You know, we should have started, our emissions should have started peaking around 2019. It says, you know, starting in 2019 will require monumental mitigation rates, and we're already in 2002, and we still haven't started. You know, emissions are still going up. The concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere is still going up, as you know, the IPCC revealed. We're now, I think, at 418 parts per million, and it's going up at 1 or 2 parts per million per year. And scientists say a safe concentration is around 350 parts per year. So the question is, if, you know, net zero is so bad, it hides a multitude of sins. You know, things like nuclear. So one of the things that the government is gambling on is nuclear power, which is not really a solution to the problem for all sorts of reasons. I don't want to go through a whole meeting on what is wrong with nuclear power, but it's very, very costly for a start. Of course, there are all the safety and nuclear proliferation issues, but it's also very, you know, very, very costly. The lead times for introducing nuclear power are decades. You know, and we need rapid carbon reductions now. The government is working on producing an energy strategy paper, which they'll be coming out with, I think, in a few days' time, in which they'll be announcing a huge ramp up of nuclear. And the thing about nuclear is it's totally uneconomic. And so when they go on about, you know, the green levy, what the government did last year was they passed a special nuclear financing bill. And the cost of nuclear, which is not going down, actually is going up. It's probably double the cost of renewables. All that cost is going to be loaded onto bill payers. So, you know, the whole this nonsense that these right-wing Tory MPs are on about, you know, concerning about the, you know, the high cost of renewables. You know, they just passed in December a nuclear financing bill, which is mean that electricity bills are going to go up much, much more than they would normally have. And at the same time as that, we've got, you know, the Tories, a big fight within the Conservative Party over the question of fracking. So there's a group of, you know, very, very right-wing Tory MPs who are, you know, dead set on overturning any commitments on climate change. I mean, one question I think we need to ask ourselves is, if, you know, net zero is so bad, and it is pretty bad, it is a scam, as Kevin Anderson described it, a leading climate scientist. If it's so bad, why are these right-wing Tory MPs so much against it? I mean, I think that's an interesting discussion. I think part of the reason is within the ruling class, there isn't a unified position. There is a section of the ruling class, the capitalist class, which is committed to burning fossil fuels at all costs, no matter what the consequences are to the environment or the planet and anything else. There is a, completely sociopathic, I mean, the capitalist class are sociopathic in that they will put their interests of profit before the interests of human life or anything else. And I think this does, illustrate this. But I think there's also an ideological component to it. And one of those ideological components is actually to fight the left. And I think one of the interesting things about what's been going on, and if you listen to talk radio, which I'm afraid I do occasionally, you will see, the right wing repeatedly going on and on about attacking the green lentil eating eco warriors, so-called eco warriors, and there is definitely a concerted attempt by the right wing to drive a wedge between the environmental movement and the working class. And you can see this over the question of fracking, over the question of the energy bills, how, people like this guy here, Steve Baker, who chairs what's the supposedly, net zero campaign, net zero scrutiny group, which is a collection of very right-wing conservative MPs. And they're connected with this climate denialist front group called the Global Warming Policy Foundation, whose financing is completely opaque. We don't really know who's behind it. We know some of the finances. People like Paul Hinz is a hedge fund manager, and this shady group has started this cost of net zero campaign. But one of the interesting things about it, the cost of living campaign of the right wing, they produced a completely ridiculous pamphlet, which I read, called Taking Back Control, which advocates totally scrapping all renewable energy commitments, building, phasing out wind power. It's a kind of, the wet dream of the climate denialist fantasists, the kind of Trumpist, Britain's version of the kind of Trumpist fantasy of, building coal-fired power stations, this whole commitment to fossil fuels. I don't think it's really taken off. This right-wing group of Tory MPs who want to start a culture war on renewable energy and on climate hasn't really taken off in a big way. And the thing is, things can change, things may change, but at the moment they haven't had really much traction, I think, with the public. You may have recalled that, what's his name? Farage had to cancel an anti-net zero rally in Manchester a few weeks ago. And I think that why that hasn't really resonated with people is, I think within the working class, there is a real concern about climate change. And I think, people like Farage think, working class people are completely stupid and don't realize that if oil and gas prices are rising, then you don't want to invest in more oil and gas power stations. What you want to do is invest in things like renewables, which are not subject to price rises in the same way. And I think that at the moment they haven't really had so much of a traction, but I think we should certainly we shouldn't underestimate these people. And I think since the invasion of the Ukraine has happened, they have people like Steve Baker have actually switched tack, and rather than talking about green you know, the green levy and stuff like that. I mean, there's lots of criticisms you can make of the green levy, which is a kind of a flat tax on the energy bills, which was around 8%. I might have a breakdown of it somewhere here. Yeah, I mean, this is what an energy bill used to look like. It's completely out of date. I got this graphic from Ofgem, the Ofgem website. They've actually removed it now. They no longer have on the Ofgem website. Very interesting. They no longer have any breakdowns on the cost of fuel, because if they had the latest version of this, you would see the wholesale costs would be enormous. Would be you know, not 46%, but it probably would be 70% or something like that. And the environmental and social costs, the stuff that the right-wing Tories want to get rid of, would be an even smaller diminishing proportion. Such has been the enormous rise in the increase in energy. Where is it? Where is the graph or just the latest price rises? I've got here, this is what's called the trade transfer facility. So the way gas is traded on the international markets is through, you know, major centers like Rotterdam and London, and the the gas that we consume in our homes is basically the gas is purchased. You know, the tariff is set, and the energy companies, what they've been doing is they've been making a gamble that they can have a fixed tariff for 1 or 2 years, and they can rely on the spot market to purchase the gas. And so what happened is, because they've got these fixed tariffs, which they're locked into, as soon as these the supposed challenger energy companies, as soon as they had, you know, the prices started spiking. So you've got one spike here, and I'll leave you to guess what this spike up here is all about. But they basically went bankrupt because the price that they're charging us is not equal, is much less than the charge they're having to pay on the wholesale market. And it shows you, you know, the totally absurd and ridiculous nature of the, you know, free market in energy. This is not the way to run, and, you know, this neoliberal free market ideology has completely, you know, exposed the inadequacies of the current setup. You know, these you know, energy companies. My one is Bulb, for instance, has gone bankrupt and has had to be bailed out by the government. I suppose many of you will also have, you know, these new so-called challenger energy companies that have all gone bankrupt and now all having to be rescued by the energy payers, because the cost of the bankruptcies of these companies is all going to be falling on us, and of course, you know, we're going to be facing huge increases. And I think that is why the right is very keen to start mobilizing and deflecting the anger away from the real culprits and towards, you know, the climate activists. And so, you know, you've got people like Steve Baker, but not just him. You know, the cheap attacks on green energy actually started quite a while back with you know, David Cameron, you know, making this ridiculous you know, attack on what's green energy, so-called green energy crap, as he called it. You know, things like home insulation. Had we been insulating homes 10 years ago, this is what's really criminal about this government, is they could have had a really big comprehensive program on insulation. They could have introduced initiatives, regulations, so that new build houses would be, 80, 90% energy efficient. But what they did was they scrapped all the home insulation programs. They privatized and outsourced the delivery of home insulation to these, big multinational companies that were totally corrupt and incompetent, and not, and instead of the money going towards home insulation, it was going towards these corrupt companies who were managing these home insulation programs, and the money wasn't actually getting in to achieving energy efficiency. And because of that, according to Carbon Brief, energy bills in the UK are nearly £2.5 billion higher than they would have been if they had not scrapped the, all the so-called war on red tape, had they actually taken serious initiatives to, improve energy efficiency 10 years ago, we would be in a far less serious situation than we are now. So it's the stupidity and short-sightedness of this government. But not only that, there's also been the Rishi Sunak, while people have been suffering with increasing bills, the oil and gas companies have been making gigantic profits out of the price increases. And the Chancellor has done practically nothing to actually tax this windfall and ease the burden that people are going to be paying, because these bills are going to be really causing destitution. And I think there is a big the right wing is mobilizing because they actually want to deflect the anger away from them and start attacking, the the very people that have been warning and campaigning for, climate justice, against fuel poverty, for initiatives to insulate homes. These are the people the government wants to blame for the crisis. And so you've got, a massive attack on, environmental activists. So, Insulate Britain activists have been receiving incredibly severe sentences for the actions they've been taken. I mean, if you run over someone and kill them and commit manslaughter, you will get probably shorter jail sentences than Insulate Britain activists have been getting for, simply warning us of the actual climate emergency. I mean, we can debate, what are the best tactics, or whether these tactics are, the best ones to actually build a movement. But the points they're making are things we would totally and completely support. But they're the ones that are being demonized in this culture war. We've got Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, who's claimed that Extinction Rebellion activists is a so-called, she's basically comparing them to terrorists. It's quite shocking. And the new police and criminal evidence crime bill that is going through Parliament, and a bill that Priti Patel has been pursuing, you can see this is quite an ideological, there is an attempt to use the state to crush the movement, to use force to intimidate it, and this is all part of the ideological assault that the climate justice movement is facing in Britain. And I think I think for us, I think it's very important that we stand with climate justice groups, support them, but also offer alternatives, or put forward plans for how we can actually build and broaden the movement. And I think, in that whole discussion, I think, the work of the Campaign Against Climate Change Trade Union Group is very important. I think one of the big problems we face is there's a huge gap between the advanced sections of our class and the rest. And if you consider, for instance, the way that some unions have, the attitude that some unions like the GMB have been having, it's absolutely terrible. The TUC passed a motion last September that effectively backed the government policy for for gas and nuclear. And these are the two technologies that we shouldn't be using. We should be backing renewable energy, we should not be backing nuclear power. But one of the issues and challenges we face is that within the working class, although there is awareness, that does not necessarily percolate to the higher echelons of the union bureaucracy. Also, there is a lot of misunderstanding and confusion. And also, there have been big concessions that have been made to unions like the GMB. For instance, the TUC passed a very bad policy which said that the only unions that should have that unions whose workers are in industries such as fossil fuel industries, they should have a veto on any climate policies that the TUC will pass. So that was passed a couple of years ago. So basically, even though unions like the Unison or the CPSA or other unions will be very progressive, have very progressive policies, when it comes to the discussion at the TUC conference, the decisive votes, the decisive position, and the ones that the other unions defer to are the positions taken by, for instance, the GMB or Unite, and they have less, progressive policies when it comes to climate change. And I think for us, this is a huge challenge because there is definitely an attempt by the far right to mobilize the working class against climate justice. I think this is the way we need to understand it. There's a really concerted attempt by the far right to use the energy crisis and the question about energy security as a battering ram to smash the climate movement in Britain. And we are definitely a target of that. It's not just Extinction Rebellion, it's all of us who are fighting for climate justice are in the crosshairs of this right-wing attack. People like Patel are gunning for us just as much as they're gunning for XR, and we need to build a united movement. It's an absolute urgency that we get, discussion in the trade union movement of climate justice, of how we change the whole discourse and discussion within the working class over the question of climate change. I think the climate jobs pamphlet is a very, very useful tool for us in actually furthering that discussion. And I think it's something we really need to do. And it's an absolutely monumental struggle for us, a tiny group, small group, to actually have that debate with hundreds of thousands of workers. But it's something we need to do to broaden that discussion and to actually build a consensus around climate justice within the working class. Because if we don't take up these issues of fuel poverty and the bills and what is the real alternative, then the right will attempt to mobilize the working class against climate justice. And that would be an enormous and terrible setback. But I think we can actually win this. I don't think that the right, their pathetic mobilizations, that Farage did, shows that there is, an understanding. And I think we need to build on that, and we need to work urgently to actually change the discussion within the working class on what the solution is. Because arguments that seem very arcane and technical a couple of years ago become very, very political. Who would have thought, energy storage would be such a political hot potato? A subject that people will be discussing in their coffee or beer breaks. And I think that is the situation we have now. We've got a big job of education to do. We've got a big job of education to be discussing, what does the government mean by energy security? Is it actually compatible with, climate justice or ending fuel poverty? And all these kinds of big discussions we need to be having. And I think, this climate jobs pamphlet, I think is very useful. And I think if I can convince people to download it from the website and read it, I think that would have been for me a very good outcome for this meeting. So I'll leave it at that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, John. Thank you. That was great. All right.